Have you ever asked yourself what a man truly gives when he lies with someone? It is not just the body, not just performance. What he offers, often without knowing, is the soul, a soul aching for affection, for recognition, for the silent ache of wanting to be chosen. He gives hunger, but it comes masked as lust, as dominance, as drive. What looks like desire is often a cry. It is not simply skin against skin. There's a current, deeper, older, pulling beneath. Because at the root, a man doesn't crave sex. He craves to be seen, to be felt, to be held whole, even in his brokenness. When he kneels before a woman's body, it may look like worship of pleasure, but it's often grief. The grief of unheld boyhood, of affection denied, of a mother's warmth he never knew how to ask for. It looks physical, but it is spiritual. It looks like power, but it is inherited emptiness, disguised as conquest. Because real intimacy, when it is real, rips the mask off performance. It reveals the armor is thin. It shows the ache beneath the pride. And in that raw silence, Carl Jung's truth begins to echo. Every act of intimacy reveals more than it appears. To Jung, desire was never mere instinct. It was symbolic, a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious, between the man you think you are and the one you've buried. Desire is not born in the flesh. It is born in the psyche, in the shadow, in the unmet need. Sex, then, is not just a physical act. It is an exchange of energy, of memory, of intention, of wounds. And when the wrong woman receives that offering, one not rooted in presence, not anchored in truth, what should be pleasure becomes depletion, soul drainage, a fatigue no sleep can heal. This is why so many men feel empty afterward, not because of the act, but because of the absence of spirit within it. Because each time you give yourself away without awareness, without reverence, you trade fragments of your essence for moments of fleeting validation. Yes, the female body is a temple, but so is yours. And when temples collide without consciousness, they create chaos, not union. You are not just having sex, you are opening portals, and not all portals lead home. As this journey unfolds, you will begin to see what has always been true, that intimacy, real intimacy, is less about bodies and more about truth. Not the truth you tell others, but the truth you finally tell yourself. No one ever taught you how to decode it, did they? What it means when a man truly surrenders in intimacy. Because when he does, it's not just his body he reveals. It's the parts of his soul he never knew how to voice. The fear of being left, the ache of never feeling enough, the strength that was always camouflage for sorrow, and the silence, a silence thick with memory, with moments he never learned to name. Visceral intimacy has nothing to do with sex. It is about becoming naked from the inside out, because in that glance, in the pause between touches, the invisible child appears, the one who only wanted to be loved without having to earn it. That, right there, is more terrifying than any physical exposure. How many men, in that split second of rawness, collapse inside, even as their faces remain still? The mask of masculinity doesn't shatter from yelling. It dissolves, in quiet. A single touch can echo through every chamber of abandonment. One gentle gesture can brush against a scar he never learned how to explain. Jung said, "The unconscious is always speaking, but in intimacy, it screams. The body becomes the stage, and the soul, the performer, revealing pain it never meant to show. This is why so many men pull away just when it starts to feel real. Because true intimacy is an emotional mirror, and not everyone is ready to see what stares back. The unraveling of masculine pride does not begin with a crisis. It begins with a touch, soft enough to slip past the armor, strong enough to awaken something buried. But awakening is not the end. It's the beginning. Most men were raised to believe that giving pleasure is about performance, technique, impress, prove, do it well, and maybe you'll be worthy. But real pleasure, the kind that stirs the soul, has nothing to do with skill. and everything to do with presence. To give pleasure is not performance. It is devotion, a sacred return to the part of you you were told to forget. Because beneath the muscle, beneath the pride, every man carries something soft, delicate, hidden, the feminine within. Jung called it the Anima, the soul's forgotten half. And here is the paradox. When a man truly surrenders in intimacy, he does not just touch her. He touches himself, the self he left behind. Sacred pleasure is not control. It is surrender. It is not technique. It is truth. And in that truth, in that sacred ritual of touch, something stirs, something no performance can fake. The mask falls, the armor melts, and for a moment, he is whole. This is the moment where desire ceases to be about the body and becomes about the soul. Because sacred intimacy does not begin in the flesh. It begins in silence, in listening without needing to speak, in letting that long-banished sensitivity rise again from beneath the rubble. It is not about impressing, not about conquering, not about proving anything to anyone. It is about returning to the self, to the raw, unguarded self, beneath the fractured armor, beneath the roles, beneath the noise. And when that return happens, pleasure becomes healing. But for many men, that healing still feels far too dangerous. They say they want love, but what they crave, deep down, is approval, recognition, a sense of worth borrowed from someone else's eyes. Because desire is not born only from connection, it is born from lack, from lineage, from an ancient ache to be chosen. As if every relationship was an audition for the invisible child within, still waiting to hear, "I see you, you matter." And that is where the trap begins. When the hunger to be loved outweighs the ability to love oneself, a man begins to vanish. He shapeshifts. He silences his truth. He bends. He bleeds himself dry for crumbs of affection. Have you seen that man? The one who is always kind, always available, always giving, and still ignored, forgotten. Not because he is wrong, but because he is trapped, caught in a loop of emotional survival. Because excessive kindness is not always love. Sometimes it is pain, disguised as virtue. He's not offering love. He's bargaining for it, performing worth, begging with gestures, hoping to be rescued from a void he's never faced. And this is where the shadow turns dark, when he begins to expect the other to save him, to make him whole, to fix the self-love he never learned to hold. But that never works. Healing never comes through substitution. It comes through courage. The courage to ask, what am I really trying to prove? Because sometimes that desperate effort to be the perfect partner is just the mask of a man whose self-worth lies in ruins. And when that truth is seen, not avoided, not resisted, the mask begins to fall. The theater of performance crumbles, and what rises is presence, raw, unpolished, whole. The man who no longer begs to be loved, but simply is, because he has faced the shadow and made peace with it. And it's in that moment everything changes. Carl Jung once wrote one of the most piercing truths: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And that is what happens to so many men. They think they are choosing, but they are only reenacting, playing out old wounds with new faces. True freedom begins not when a man finds the right partner, but when he finally stops performing and starts becoming. The shadow, it is not the part you hate, it is the part you hide, wounded, rejected, forgotten. It moves in silence. It takes the wheel of a man's life without him even knowing he's no longer driving. And so, every relationship becomes déjà vu, a repetition of pain, a trauma echo dressed in new names, new faces, but the same ache. This is why intimacy can feel like a minefield, not because the other is toxic, but because the wounds within are still open. He arrives wearing the mask of strength, but inside he is collapsing, not from her, but from the emptiness he never learned to heal. In this quiet war, the body becomes either a fortress or a bridge. It all depends. Does he see vulnerability as a threat or an invitation? Because the shadow hides not in darkness, but in denial. That fear of weakness, that panic of rejection, that silent hunger to be enough. It all lives below, waiting for touch, for love, for the moment it can slip out and speak. And it does speak, in the trembling pause before intimacy, in the way his body tenses, in the choices he repeats and calls fate. Every man, at some point, projects what he hasn't yet faced within. He looks at a woman and without knowing, makes her everything. Lover, mother, confidant, savior. But the wound is not in loving. The wound is in expecting her to fill a hole he's never explored. That's not love. That is the shadow's projection, a ghost of ancestral hunger in search of affection that was never lived. And when you place someone on a pedestal, you don't see them. You see your reflection, your ache, your unmet self. And here comes the collapse. Because the first mistake shatters the fantasy, and the one you once adored, you now resent. Desire turns to bitterness. Affection becomes accusation. Not because she failed you, but because you tried to find in her what was always meant to be awakened within. Your sleeping animal, your denied softness, your buried presence. And in that desperate chase to feel whole, many men lose themselves completely. They confuse intensity with intimacy, lack with connection, and presence with salvation. But no one can save you from the parts of you you've refused to meet. No woman, no matter how radiant, how nurturing, how divine, can be the perfect mirror for a man who has yet to meet himself. Because the real mirror is inward. And to face that reflection, raw, naked, unfiltered, requires a kind of courage most men were never taught to wield. Yet it is that courage that marks the threshold of transformation. Most men spend their lives waiting to be chosen, a glance, a kind word, a soft hand that whispers, "You are enough." But here is the truth, sharp as it is silent. Validation that comes from the outside will always fade, because whatever is given can also be taken. And so the healing begins only when a man stops begging for affection, when he sees that the thirst to be chosen is only quenched by choosing himself. Self-knowledge is not found in books. It is born in the trenches of silence. It is forged in the moments you do not flinch from your own emptiness. To sit in the void, to listen without words, to stay in when every part of you wants to run. That is where the soul in ruins begins to rebuild itself. That is where true masculine awakening begins. And from there, intimacy stops being a stage for performance and becomes a mirror, brutal, honest, and holy. Because desire, when born from within, does not chase. It invites. It dances. It does not plead. It radiates. That is the moment sexuality transforms. No longer an escape, but a return, where pleasure is not taken from emptiness, but shared from fullness, where the shadow becomes an oracle and silence turns into wisdom. But to arrive there, a man must pass through the gates of his own ego. He must tear off the masks, the mask of the hero, the provider, the unbreakable one. And underneath it all, he finds something the world taught him to fear, his exposed, breathing humanity. Not every woman deserves access to your body, much less your energy, because unconscious sex is not pleasure. It is permission for your life force to be drained without resistance. There are women disconnected from their essence, wounded by their own pasts, entangled in drama, feeding on the same void they never learned to face. And when you merge with that void, it consumes you, your clarity, your strength, your direction. You leave emptier than when you arrived, and still, you call it intimacy, you call it pleasure. But what she carries is not just her body. She carries her history, her patterns, her emotional contracts with men before you. And when you step into her world without awareness, you inherit all of it. Not every connection is sacred, not every touch is healing, and not every desire leads you home. All of it, her history, her heartbreak, her hunger, is etched into her body. And sex is the doorway through which those energies, invited or not, enter your life. You are not just touching skin. You are engaging essence. You are merging with her energy, her trauma, her ghosts. And if you are not fully awake, that fusion becomes contamination. Suddenly you feel drained, disoriented, numb, and you don't know why. Because this kind of intimacy is not always visible, but its consequences are. It doesn't matter how strong your body is, how confident you appear, how many spiritual quotes you post. If you continue offering your sacred self to women who live in chaos, you will become that chaos. It takes more than attraction. It takes discernment, presence, and a new kind of decision-making. Because as long as you keep giving yourself just to silence the emptiness inside, your soul will remain fractured. And one day, it may not return from where it was taken. So ask yourself, honestly, how many times did you lie in bed thinking it was just desire, but woke up feeling more lost? How many times did you mistake pleasure for connection and gave your energy to someone who couldn't even hold her own? The answer might sting, but it could also save you, because now you can no longer pretend you don't know. You know that sex is not a game. It is a ritual, that the body is not just flesh, it is an oracle. And every intimate choice you make either rebuilds you or buries you deeper into your own abyss. So the question is this: will you keep giving all of yourself to someone who only wants a piece of you? Or will you finally start requiring a level of consciousness worthy of your soul? The choice is yours. If something inside you stirred, if a truth was touched, drop the words that spoke to your soul below and share this with the men still asleep. Because this isn't just about sex. This is about who you are when no one is watching. Not performance, but presence.